Goldie Hawn spent decades making the world laugh. Her bright eyes, her infectious giggle, and her natural warmth made her one of the most beloved actresses Hollywood had ever seen. People called her America's sweetheart, and for good reason. She lit up every screen she appeared on, and audiences trusted her completely. But while the cameras were rolling and the spotlights were shining, something very different was happening behind the scenes. Now, at 79 years old, Goldie has decided that the time for silence is over. She is finally ready to tell the truth about what she experienced, who hurt her, and why she quietly walked away from certain people without ever saying a word publicly. The story she is telling is not one of rage or bitterness. It is something quieter and, in many ways, far more powerful. While the world saw a woman always smiling, always gracious, always composed, she was quietly carrying wounds that no one ever noticed. She heard the whispers, she felt the dismissals, she watched opportunities disappear without explanation, and she remembered every single moment. Now those memories are finally coming to light, and what they reveal about some of Hollywood's most famous names is both surprising and deeply uncomfortable. If you want to know the full story of what Goldie Hawn truly experienced behind Hollywood's most glamorous doors, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. Stories like this one don't stay hidden forever, and we make sure you hear them first. The first name on Goldie's quiet and private list was Bill Murray. It was not a long history of tension or years of bad blood between them. It was one single moment, brief and public, that closed the door between them permanently. It happened during a table read for a studio comedy in the late 1980s. On paper, the pairing looked exciting. Goldie Hawn, Hollywood's warmest and most charming leading lady, alongside Bill Murray, one of the most unpredictable and wildly talented comedy actors of his generation. Studio executives were thrilled. They expected something electric. What they got instead was something they had not planned for at all. Murray arrived almost an hour late to the table read. He walked in looking slightly disheveled, completely unbothered by the fact that everyone had been waiting for him. He was carrying a half-finished cup of coffee, which he casually dropped onto the script sitting on the table in front of him. Then, without any apology or acknowledgement of the delay, he looked around the room and said with a simple shrug that now they could start. The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. Everyone present could feel that something had already gone wrong before a single page had been turned. When the reading finally began, Goldie did what she had always done throughout her career. She brought warmth, natural timing, and an easy confidence to the scene. She was giving the moment everything it needed. Then, without any warning, Murray interrupted her mid-dialogue. He looked around the room with a grin and delivered a comment that landed like a sharp slap in the middle of a professional setting. He told her to try acting like she had done drama before. The room erupted in laughter. Everyone found it funny. Everyone except Goldie. She did not argue back, she did not raise her voice or attempt to defend herself. Instead, she quietly and calmly closed the script that was sitting in front of her, pushed her chair back, stood up from the table, and walked out of the room. There was no raised voice, no dramatic exit, and no confrontation, just silence. And that silence said everything that words could not. By the following morning, the studio had already received a short message from Goldie's representatives. She was no longer attached to the project. There were no interviews given, no public statement released, and no explanation offered to the press. She simply removed herself from the film and moved on. Later, in a private conversation, Goldie summed up exactly why she had made that choice. She said that Murray believed unpredictability was a form of genius. She found it exhausting. Those words captured something important about who she was and how she had chosen to live her professional life. From that point forward, she began making different choices entirely. She started stepping away from volatile creative environments. She turned down projects that were known for chaos on set. She avoided comedies that were dominated by loud, unpredictable men who confused cruelty with creativity. She chose calm over conflict, quietly and without making any fuss about it. Years later, when someone asked her directly whether she would ever consider working with Bill Murray again, she gave a simple, clear, and completely final answer. She offered no anger and no regret. The matter was simply closed. The next name to appear on Goldie's private list was Warren Beatty, and that story began with something very small. It began with the word no. In the late 1970s, Warren Beatty was at the absolute height of his power in Hollywood. He was handsome, influential, and widely considered untouchable. When he began turning his attention towards Goldie, it started in a way that seemed almost normal. There was a dinner invitation, then access to exclusive parties, and eventually a private invitation to his home in Beverly Hills. In the world Goldie moved through, that kind of invitation from a man like Beatty carried a meaning that required no explanation. But Goldie said no. She declined politely, confidently, and without apologizing for her decision. And that one small refusal changed everything. Almost overnight, the warmth that had surrounded her professional world began to disappear. Roles she had been promised were quietly given to other actresses. Meetings that had been scheduled began turning into vague cancellations. Projects that had once carried her name suddenly moved forward without her. She didn't ask too many questions. She simply watched as things slowly shifted around her and understood exactly whose pride had been wounded. The impact did not stop there. It spread, quietly, through the industry. Directors who had once praised her openly began hesitating. The professional ground beneath her feet, which had felt so solid, seemed to become uncertain. It lingered this way well into the early 1980s. Beatty's influence in Hollywood was enormous, and by all accounts, he used it without hesitation whenever he felt it was necessary. Years later, Goldie described the experience with just 6 simple but devastating words. She said he could not handle rejection and that he punished it. That was all she needed to say. It explained the entire chapter without a single dramatic flourish. Goldie never confronted Warren Beatty directly. She never spoke about him publicly. She simply allowed time to pass and let fate handle what she would not. Eventually, they ended up in the same room again at an awards ceremony. Beatty walked toward her with an easy smile, behaving as though nothing had ever happened between them. Goldie looked at him calmly, returned a polite and composed smile, and then turned away before he could finish speaking to her. No scene, no drama, no public moment, just a quiet, unmistakable answer delivered with complete dignity. The third name on her list was Dustin Hoffman, and this one surprised people perhaps more than any other. To the outside world, Hoffman was a legend. He was considered one of the greatest actors of his generation, a man of extraordinary craft and deep artistic seriousness. For a long time, Goldie shared that view, but one audition in the early 1980s changed her opinion completely. At that point in her career, Goldie was looking to grow. Comedy had brought her success and fame, but she wanted to show audiences and the industry that she was capable of more. She wanted to demonstrate emotional depth, real dramatic ability, and a range that went beyond the roles she had become known for. When a prestigious drama began looking for its cast, the idea of pairing Goldie with Hoffman excited the producers enormously. It seemed like an inspired combination. It did not remain inspiring for long. Partway through a script reading, Hoffman suddenly stopped the scene. He turned toward Goldie, but not with the kind of thoughtful feedback a colleague might offer. His expression was colder than that. Then, instead of speaking to her directly, he turned to the producers and said bluntly that she was still playing it like a sitcom. The room went completely quiet. The comment was deliberate and it was dismissive, delivered in a way designed to undercut rather than guide. What Goldie did next was remarkable in its own quiet way. She did not challenge him. She did not respond with hurt or anger. She offered no visible reaction whatsoever. She simply continued the scene, calm and fully professional, as though nothing had been said. When the reading was done, she thanked everyone in the room with genuine courtesy and walked out before the uncomfortable silence had a chance to settle. The following morning, her agent received a call. The project moved on without her. The fourth name that eventually found its way onto Goldie's quiet list was Chevy Chase. Their story had actually started with genuine promise. In 1978, they were paired together in Foul Play, and on screen their chemistry seemed effortless and genuinely enjoyable. Audiences responded warmly to them. The film worked, but behind the cameras, a very different atmosphere had been growing throughout the shoot.
From early on, Chase carried himself on set as though the spotlight had been designed specifically for him and for no one else. He would frequently mock lines from the script, come up with his own improvisations on the spot, and disrupt carefully planned scenes with his own sense of what was funnier. In the beginning, this could be passed off as the natural behavior of a spontaneous comic actor, but whenever Goldie managed to draw a bigger laugh from the crew, something in Chase visibly darkened. His mood would turn sour, uncomfortable silences would fall over the set, and his irritation would become increasingly difficult to ignore or excuse. What bothered Goldie most was not the big moments of friction, but the small, quiet ones, the comments muttered just low enough to stay below the surface of open conflict, but clearly loud enough for her to hear. At one point during filming, he reportedly said that she was lucky to be there. It was a short sentence, a handful of words, but it carried enough weight to permanently destroy whatever professional respect had existed between them. There was never an argument, never a confrontation. Instead, something quietly broke that would never be repaired. After foul play, Chevy Chase became a name Goldie simply preferred not to speak about again. The fifth name on the list came from a very different kind of moment and from a person whose behavior Goldie had not anticipated. Sean Penn was someone she did not know especially well, and what placed him on her private list had nothing to do with a professional collaboration. It was a single public moment at a charity gala in Malibu in 2014 that she never forgot.
Goldie had stepped onto the stage at a prestigious event to speak about mental health awareness, a cause she had supported with real dedication for many years. As she began her remarks, most of the room settled into respectful silence. She spoke with the same warmth and composure that had defined her public presence throughout her entire career. But at one table, the atmosphere was noticeably different. Sean Penn sat leaning back in his chair. He sighed loudly, rolled his eyes in a manner that nearby guests could clearly see, and muttered a comment just loud enough to carry. He called it another celebrity wellness lecture. Goldie continued speaking without any visible disruption to her composure. She finished her remarks and received sincere applause from the audience. But the moment that stayed with her most came after she left the stage. Penn looked around the table, smirked, and casually said that she should stick to giggling. Goldie heard it. She did not confront him. She did not let her expression change or her composure slip. She smiled politely, raised her glass in a small, restrained gesture, and quietly excused herself from the room earlier than she had planned. Only once she was inside her car, with the door closed and the evening behind her, did she allow herself to feel what she had been holding in. The sixth and final name on Goldie's list was Kirk Douglas, and in some ways his story was the most unexpected of all. Kirk Douglas was not someone anyone would have described as an adversary. He was one of Hollywood's most celebrated legends, a man held in enormous respect across the entire industry. And yet it was precisely because of that reputation that the moment hurt in the particular way that it did. It happened during an industry panel in the late 1990s. By that point, Goldie was no longer the young actress she had once been. She was an Academy Award winner. She was a producer. She had built genuine authority in the industry through years of hard work and serious choices. When Kirk greeted her at the panel, the exchange appeared friendly and warm. He held her hand, smiled toward the gathered audience, and told her she had not aged a single day, calling her sweetheart. The room responded with appreciative laughter. Goldie smiled back graciously, but the comment landed differently than it was meant to. It felt less like a compliment and more like a reminder of how he still chose to see her, as the charming young girl rather than the accomplished woman standing in front of him. As the panel discussion continued, the dynamic slowly revealed itself more clearly. Kirk began speaking over her, finishing her thoughts before she could complete them, and even correcting her mid-sentence in front of everyone present. Each interruption was kept subtle and almost polished, but every one of them pulled the spotlight quietly back toward him and away from her, as though her contributions still required his endorsement to carry full weight. Goldie never made a scene. She never criticized Kirk Douglas in any public setting. In fact, she continued to speak positively about his son, Michael Douglas, often praising his professionalism and the genuine respect he showed toward his colleagues.
But Kirk's name slowly faded from her conversations entirely. It simply disappeared, with no announcement and no explanation. Years later, reflecting on moments like that one, Goldie offered a thought that said everything. She said that some men simply do not deserve a second act in your memory. Quiet, measured, and completely final. What makes all 6 of these stories so striking is not the drama within them, it is the absence of drama. Goldie Hawn never shouted, she never called press conferences or published bitter accounts. She simply chose, each time and with complete clarity, to remove certain people from her world without giving them the satisfaction of a public reaction. She protected her peace quietly, gracefully, and with a dignity that most people never even noticed. And now, as these moments finally come to light, the perfectly polished image of Hollywood's golden era begins to look just a little more complicated than it did before.